From Mississippi.
Mr. President, tomorrow, apparently the Senate is going to have an opportunity to weigh in on the issue of whether it is good policy to allow uninspected, adulterated Vietnamese catfish into the United States. That will be the issue before us in the form of a resolution to disapprove a USDA regulation. The Senate will vote on whether it's a good idea to expose American consumers to catfish containing illegal antibiotics, heavy metals, and other carcinogens. I think the Senate will once again say that we need to protect American consumers from these harmful contents of imported catfish, and we need to protect them by continuing a new United States Department of Agriculture catfish inspection program. Now, what had happened before we had the USDA catfish inspection program? Under previous law, the Food and Drug Administration inspected catfish coming into the United States, principally Vietnamese catfish. And what we found out in this program, that only 2% of the catfish coming in got inspected. The other 98% came through without the federal government taking a look at it. And what we learned from the information given to us was that some of the catfish coming in did have these harmful chemicals in them. And so the Farm Bill passed by the Congress changed the inspection regime from the FDA to where it is now, the United States Department of Agriculture. And under the Department of Agriculture program, almost all of the catfish will be inspected to make sure it's free of these harmful substances. Now, the people who are trying to go back to the old method of inspection make some claims. They say the rule is duplicative. The new USDA rule is duplicative. They say it's a WTO violation, and they say it's costly. I would tell my colleagues, and I want people listening back in their offices, I want my colleagues back in listening in their offices, Mr. President, to understand this. There will not be a duplicative program. FDA is out of the catfish inspection business as of March 1st of this year. The only inspections being carried out now are through USDA. So the argument that this new program is duplicative is factually incorrect. You can say it as many times as you want to, doesn't make it true. There's no duplication. Furthermore, there's no WTO violation. The equivalent standards are being applied both to imported and domestic fish. And so the standards are the same. We just want to make sure they're safe. We're pretty sure about domestic catfish. A lot of it's grown in my state of Mississippi. A lot of it's grown in Missouri, Arkansas, Alabama. Those catfish farms are inspected. They're grown under, the fish are not caught out in a river somewhere. They are inspected where they're grown and harvested under very controlled conditions. We just want all the fish consumed in the United States to be as safe as domestically produced fish. And then thirdly, they say the new rule is costly. Well, the entire program is going to cost $1.1 million a year through USDA. I would say $1 million a year to protect the American consumers is a reasonable price to pay. It is not costly in the scheme of things. Now, let me tell you what we found so far in the brief history of this new USDA program. We found that catfish coming in from Vietnam was adulterated. And I can hardly pronounce these words, but I have here a publication from Food Chemical News Today, dated today, May the 23rd, and it reports that according to the USDA Food Safety and Inspection Service, they have already found 2 shipments that have just come in recent weeks that were adulterated. This is Vietnamese catfish that would have been consumed by American consumers in restaurants and bought at supermarkets that the U.S. Department of Agriculture caught. It wouldn't let it in, sent it back. Thank heaven they did it, because it contained crystal violet, Genetian crystal violet, in 1 shipment. So they didn't allow it in. That's the kind of inspection that this vote tomorrow would try to stop. I want to keep those inspections, Mr. President. The other shipment that was not allowed in contained malachite green. It contained enrofloxacin and fluoroquinolone, all chemicals and substances that are prohibited to be consumed in the United States because they're not safe. They contain heavy metals, they contain carcinogens, they contain illegal antibiotics, and we're trying to protect the United States consumers from doing this. Now, I will give the authors of this resolution of disapproval tomorrow, I will give them credit. This would cut the price of fish somewhat in restaurants. But I'll tell you what, if my colleagues want to foist less expensive catfish off on the American consumers that contain heavy metals, antibiotics, and carcinogens, let them have at it. I don't think the majority of the Senate wants to do that in the name of a duplicative program, which is not duplicative, and in the name of reducing costs when the whole program costs about $1 million a year. So I want my colleagues to be aware that this vote is going to come up tomorrow. It's a very unusual vote. It's a Congressional Review Act, and 30 of my colleagues have signed a petition, so it must come to a vote, and it must come tomorrow afternoon. The vote to proceed will take place tomorrow afternoon. If the vote to proceed passes, and I certainly hope it does not, then we will have 10 hours of debate right here in the middle of a week when we should be talking about national defense and all of the issues that really trouble Americans. We have 10 hours of debate according to the law on whether the regulation should go forward. I would hope, Mr. President, that we'll simply vote against the motion to proceed tomorrow, and that way, under the rule, under the Congressional Review Act, that will be the end of the matter. And the Department of Agriculture can keep inspecting and keep protecting American consumers. So Americans should be aware that this is coming up. And members of my colleagues and their staff should get schooled in this rather obscure issue. Should the resolution pass, Mr. President, we will have the very unusual and unworkable situation of the Farm Bill still being the law of the land, of the Department of Agriculture still being the agency in charge of inspections. That'll still be the law. We simply won't have a rule allowing that part of the bill to be implemented. And so, in effect, since the FDA inspection regime has ended according to law, we'll have no inspection whatsoever. That is my understanding of the result should the resolution of disapproval be approved. I don't think it will be approved. I think we will stand tomorrow for consumer protection and for applying the laws of consumer safety and food safety evenly and across the board. And so I urge a no vote tomorrow on the motion to proceed. And I thank my colleagues for their attention and yield back.